Hello everyone. Actually, why not start a minute earlier? So today I have a plan for us. I would like to talk to everyone for like 2 hours or something. We're gonna discuss, wait a second. We're gonna discuss React query. I've tried it this weekend. I didn't do much, so we will just make a to-do application using React query plus Airtable. For those who don't know, Airtable is a spreadsheets kind of service, but it's way more powerful. So it can serve as a database. We'll talk about it in a minute. So you can have a table with your data, and also you can have a generated documentation to access this data through the automatically generated API, which is amazing. Next, I would like to briefly talk about tests, like the overall approach that I'm using and the concept to conceptualize what are React components and how can we test them. So we'll discuss what is that we can test and how we can organize it. I have a little repo to demonstrate. And then we can just chat a little bit. I hope we will manage to fit everything in 2 hours. If not, well, we'll have another stream next Wednesday. Yeah, hey everyone. I see your comments. So let's start with React query. A lot of people were requesting to talk about it. I didn't work with it before. I worked with React Apollo. If you worked with GraphQL, you probably know what Apollo is. It's a framework both for backend and frontend that simplifies GraphQL queries. And the API it provides nowadays is based on hooks. So you have queries, hooks for queries, where you fetch the data, and you have hooks for mutations, where you mutate the data on the server. So here it basically is the same concept. You have queries to fetch the data, and you have mutations to update the data on the server, but you can use them with regular REST APIs. Most amazing part, where is it? Most amazing part for me was that you can actually, if you want to later easily transition to GraphQL as well and still continue using React query. This is nice. And overall, this all is possible because React query is not locking you in some specific fetching mechanism. So if we open some simple window, we're going to move from the documentation to some live coding in a minute, but just to demonstrate. So if you look, where do they show fetch to do list? Yeah, here, good enough. So we use query to get the current status. It will be updated automatically. The data that we will get after we successfully receive the data. If the error will happen, this error object will be filled. And we have this function, fetch to do list. This function actually has to perform the actual data fetching. And the beauty of it is that you don't even have to really fetch the data. If you're writing tests, you can just mock the data. The only requirement is that you need to return a promise. I think it's awesome. We can use Axios, we can use regular fetch, we can easily mock the data in tests. Great, I really like it. So let's move on to the application. I see a question. Will you make videos about using Cyprus with React testing? To be honest, I don't really like Cyprus that much. If I'm planning to do a bunch of videos about end-to-end testing, but probably they will be about Test Cafe. I prefer Test Cafe. The reason I don't like Cyprus right now, I probably might review my opinion on this, is first because I had experienced some problems on Windows with Cyprus, and also it used to support only Chrome. As far as I know now, it supports different browsers, but I need to check. And also it doesn't support, still as far as I know, it doesn't support flows when you need to test the user flow that implies several open tabs. It's not possible. What's your views on Recoil.js? I didn't work with it much. I have a very small video where I just tinkered just a little bit basically repeated what they have in the documentation, so I don't have any opinion formed yet. But let's go to the app. I'm gonna start by generating a new React application. I'm in my workspace, npx create React app, React query to do. Oh, hello. Greetings from Mexico. Greetings from Sweden. Oh, I have to. As I said, I was tinkering with this project before, so let's call it rq to do. I will, by the end of this call, this stream, I'm gonna create a repo and share a link in the. Actually, why not just create a repo straight away, so you can check the code, maybe change it a little bit. And also, by the way, I had an idea. So I was going to record the React query video this Sunday, but then I realized that I don't really have time or energy to do it, and I thought, okay, let's do it during the stream. I'll just tell whatever I found out, share my opinions, and then after we have this repo done with this application, I can refine it and then record the video next Sunday. So what do you think about this concept that on Wednesdays we will have this sort of streams where we'll discuss different subjects that are interesting to you? I will try to answer your questions if I know how to answer them. If not, I will just write them down, and then in the Sunday video, I will try to create a refined version of the tutorial that we are going to work on Wednesdays. What do you think about this? So basically, you will kind of participate in creating the educational videos on my channel by asking questions and proposing the topics that are interesting to you. So let's go to rq to do, and now we need to install React query. I had a plan to add support for Markdown. So if we open the Airtable application that I've created, let me increase the font and close this thing. So we have three columns in the Airtable. We have text, which is shown in the list of the to-dos. We have the status, completed. It's a Boolean flag. And then we have notes. Notes is a text field, but unlike the regular text, you can include the... I was going to include Markdown there. I haven't found two packages that we are not going to use today, but hopefully I will add them on Sunday to this application. First one is React Markdown, that is basically a display component that displays Markdown in your React application. And another one, because we also have to edit Markdown, I was thinking about React Simple Code Editor. If you know anything better to work with Markdown, because I want the notes to support Markdown, then let me know in the comments. Maybe you worked with Markdown before. But for now, the idea is that I will use React Simple Code Editor to edit the task notes and React Markdown to display the edited version. Let's go back to the app, and now I think we are ready to start. Another thing, we will need to authenticate, and I don't want to show my private key from Airtable, so I'm going to copy the .env file. cp react query to do .env. I copy it here. It contains my API key for Airtable, and I'm just not going to show it. You will have to create your own Airtable document if you want to. Just make sure that you have the same names, all lowercase, text, completed, and notes, and it should work. Now, for now, we'll remove the app tests. We'll also go to index.css and add some styles. I'm sometimes going to refer to the old code that I wrote this Sunday. So first of all, we want both body and HTML to have height 100%, and then we want body to have display flex, and also it should align items center, justify content center. I want to do it so that all the content will be in the middle of the screen. Then we can start working on the app itself. You know what the problem is? I also see this. Okay, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna remove the bubble with myself and then add it back. So let's talk a bit about what are we gonna do. The most simple way to fetch the data is just the use query hook. It fetches it while it is still loading. It provides you with a bunch of objects, parameters, flags, like is loading, is error, and such, so you can track the completion of your request. And then in your layout, you just need to add the loading status while the query is still loading. You need to add an error message element if you got an error, or you've rendered the data. But in our case, we can do something a little bit more complex, because Airtable, if you open the API and we look at the list documentation, allows pagination. So you can download, for example, let's say you have 100 records, but every time you want to only render like 10 at a time. You can do this by specifying the, where is it? Page size attribute. I think they have it here in the example. No, they specify max records, so overall you can get only 3 records from this database. But you can also specify the page size. Yeah. Let's do it with the page size 2, so every time we can load only 2 items from the database, so that we learn how to paginate our applications as well. Are you using VS Code Vim plugin? Yes, I use Vim plugin with VS Code. What are you going to do today with React Query? So we're going to build a simple to-do application using Airtable, where I have tasks. Actually, I can show you the completed app example if you want to. Like, what will we have in the end today? Yarn start. I already have something written. So this is the ugly ass application that we're going to build. This is the input to create new to-dos. Those are to-dos from the Airtable. As you can see, test, foo, new task, test. This is what we have in the Airtable, and it loads it automatically. Cool thing about React Query is that the user unfocuses the window, like switches the tab in the browser. It automatically updates the data when you get back to the app. We'll be able to trigger the items. I can click this checkbox and complete, and then uncomplete it. Uncomplete, do undo. I can remove them, and then I can create new ones. Hey everyone, React Query rocks. Add, boom, and we have it here. If I'm gonna do a complete video about React Query on Sunday, of course I'm gonna do it, make it more pretty. But for now, we just want to have some example, discuss it, and maybe you will ask some questions that I was not gonna cover initially. Let's see. I'm gonna close this application. And now let's go to the app.js here. I'm going to remove all the layout. We're not going to need logo and app.css. Instead, I'm going to use the use infinite queries. As I said, we're going to use the paginated requests. So we're going to request the to-dos in groups of 2. First 2, then second 2, and so on. And to do this, React query has infinite queries. With infinite queries, with every response, you also get a cursor that basically refers to current position in the big list, in the complete list of items. And you can get this cursor. It can be any name. In our case, it's gonna be offset, but it depends on your data structure that you get from the backend. And then you return it from the get fetch more callback. If this value will be truthy, so for example, a string is a truthy value with some text, then can fetch more will be true, and you will have access to this variable as well, to this flag, and also you will be able to call fetch more function that is also provided by use infinite query. Also note that all queries have names or unique identifiers. We will need this a bit later when we will want to update the data, when we remove or change the items in the list. Do we have anything in the chat? No, not yet. Okay. So let's go back to the code. And we're going to use the use infinite query. Use infinite query. We'll call the query to-dos. And we need to have some method to fetch the to-dos. Fetch to-dos. We'll have to define the fetch to-dos function later. Then we pass the options object, and in this options object we define the get fetch more. It's going to be a function, and I actually only need the last group. So it returns last group and all groups. But I only need last group, so I'm only going to define it here. Then we take this, we return the last group offset. We return offset because each response from Airtable API will contain the field records. That's what we need to render. And if there are more to-dos in the list that we can fetch, it will also give you an offset. So this is why we're taking it from the last group. Let's go on. So to fetch the data, we need to define the function. I'm going to create a new module, api.js. Almost in all my projects, I create this sort of api.something, maybe .ts if it's TypeScript-based project, to hold my API communicating functions. It makes it way easier to work with this code. It makes it more platform or framework agnostic. So if you want to switch to Axios at some point, that's easy because you have a single point of integration. Export const fetch to-dos. It's a function. It doesn't require any arguments because we want to just fetch all of them. But before we can do it, we'll need to define a bunch of constants to be able to work with Airtable. So first, I'm just going to copy them because it's a bunch of things that I copied from Airtable initially. So we have the base, the table, the view, and the API URL. That's what we are going to use to combine into the request URL. Also, we will have to use the authentication header. If you open the documentation for your table, it will tell you it limits authentication. Yeah, you need to send the authentication header with bearer token, and you can get your API key on your account page. As I said, I've saved mine in the .env. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define auth header. It's an object with authorization, and here it's bearer process env React app Airtable token. This in Create React App generated applications, this is how you refer to environment properties defined in the .env, for example. They all should start with React app. Oh, I missed the letter. Airtable token. Now it's correct. Now, what are we going to do? We need to define fetch to do still. So in this case, we're going to first create an URL. URL equals template string API URL. Then we have the base name. This is this cryptic ID. Then we have table. Then we have the options like page, size, and I told you that we're going to use something very small, like two items per page. Page size equals, for now I'm going to specify 2. I didn't have to use this curly brackets, but this way it's just easier to see that we have some sort of variable that we can change later if we want to. And then the view equals view. Now, actually, we're gonna have some arguments here. First one is the key. And the key, as far as I understood, will be the query name that it will pass to it. And then we can have the options. For example, cursor. Cursor will be a link to the next page, so we can use pagination. Like, for example, if you perform this request, API airtable.com, table name, database name, table name, the options, and then you also pass the cursor or the offset with this value. Oh my god. With this value, it will basically return the next page. So we also need this one. Next, we are going to check if we have cursor. Then we need to make it let. We are going to mutate the URL. Then if we have the cursor, we will also append the cursor query param. So URL equals URL plus and offset equals cursor. Here you go. And then after we have the URL, either with the offset or cursor, or without it, just the first page, we need to perform the actual fetch operation. Fetch URL, and then we specify the headers. This is why I used, I created an object with this field because it's easier. It's easier to create the headers object. So here we, right now, we'll destructure the auth header. And if we want to add more headers, then here you go. Content, type, application, JSON. For example, right now we don't need it. It will work without this header. Then, after we got the response, we take this response and then we call response JSON. So we're going to return a promise that will resolve the request that we got into an object. Let's go to app.js, import fetch to-dos, fetch to-dos. I went to check the comments. What keyboard do you use? I'm using the regular MacBook Pro keyboard. What about it? Hope it sounds nice. I was thinking about maybe buying some mechanical keyboard, but I have zero experience with it. I really never tried any Mac keyboard. So they look nice. That's what I like about them. I really like how maniform dactyl looks like. A little bit of off topic. Dactyl maniform. I think, oh wait, why is it so small? I think this looks absolutely gorgeous. This is awesome. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I won't like it if I would try to type on it. Anyway, so now we can actually perform the query. We use infinite query. We provide the option to get fetch more. So React query can figure out if we can fetch more. So if the latest request, the latest response contains the offset field, this one, then it means that we can fetch more. And now we can get a bunch of flags. Like for example, we need to know if we're loading, is loading. That's one of the flags that use infinite query or use query or use mutation. All of them return this flag. So you can use it to show the preloader. That's what we're gonna do now. So if is loading, then return, an order return here with a paragraph that says loading. You probably could use some nice loading spinner or something better, but for us now it's fine. Then we might want to know if we got an error, if is error, and we also need to know what actually happened, the error object. So now if we are not loading, otherwise we would already return the loading element. If is error, if somehow we got an error, we return another paragraph with the error. What is next? Next, if we're not loading anything and we didn't get any errors, then probably we can render the data. And to get the data, guess what do we need to use? We need to use data. That's it. So why React Query is useful if you're just using REST APIs is that in regular React component, you would have to use effect with some state, and it would be quite a lot of code. I imagine like maybe 50 lines at least, and here it is more simple. Not counting the layout, only the logic. Could be quite wordy. But let's move on. So if we have the data, I'm going to check what are we going to do. We of course need to render some layout. I'm going to use a fragment to wrap everything. Then we'll have an unordered list of items. And then inside of them, we need to first map through the groups. So let's do the following. Here's the JavaScript block. Let's keep it for now. Let's just have, I don't know, some text here. Doesn't matter. Let's do the following. Console log data. And I'm going to add some text here. Now let's go to... I didn't launch it. I need to stop the previous one. Yeah, it's not running. And here I'm going to run yarn start. Now let's see the console. Wait, I'm looking at the console at the YouTube page. Wait a second. So we got a bunch of responses. So this is what we have. Each of them has an offset and the records. So we'll need to do the following. We'll need to map through the groups because we basically get an object of objects. We do it, we add the JavaScript block, then we get the data, we map through it for each group and its index. We do the following. Actually, we want to do it like this with round brackets. We're going to return React fragment. We use React fragment here because we need to provide the key. And even though it's not recommended to use index as a key, right here it doesn't really matter that much. And then I'm cutting a lot of corners in this video. You will get the refined version. Basically what you're seeing right now is behind the scene. And also you have a chance to ask questions and clarify if you don't understand any of that. And I will put more emphasis on this in the actual video later. So we have a group now, reference to the group. So we can go through the records. So this is what we have. Records, map, and then for each record, we're gonna do it this way. So here we return the layout. For now it will be the list item. And we want to destructure the record. Let's go back to the browser and look what structure does it have. So each record is an okay, I shouldn't have done it. Each record is an object with the field ID. We can use it as a key in the map, and it has the fields object. The fields contain the fields from your table. They will be called text, completed, and notes. In our case, we want the text field for now, but later we will also need the completed field as well. Let's go back. Here we destructure the fields. Const. First we destructure the record. Fields and ID equals record. We could actually do it here. Yeah, and then we can actually do it like this. And then we don't need return. Now here, I can pass the fields text, and the key will be ID. Something is wrong. Do you see what is wrong with my code? This is correct. This is not correct. No, it's correct. Another curly brace, so square round bracket was missing. Format the document. That should actually do it. Let's go to the app. Yeah, and now we get the first two items. We can get more if we go to API and specify that page size is 100. Boom, we get all of them. But we want pagination, so this is why we're getting them in groups, but in groups of 2. API link, which theme am I using? A lot of people ask me about this. Color theme. I'm using material theme. and this is material theme ocean high contrast. I should probably write it down somewhere because people ask this a lot. I like the icons and the colors of material theme. I used to use more like Dracula before, but now I switched to it. It's high contrast, it's easy to read. I like it. So where are we at? We now have the list rendering. We also want to be able to fetch more data. And as I said, we are using the infinite query, and it returns a function that allows you to fetch more. To be able to do this, we're going to get this function from this query, fetch more, but we also need to know, can we fetch more? Like, does it even make sense to call this function? And this is why we can get a flag called can fetch more. What? No. Format the document. Now, below the items, we can create a piece of layout that will be responsible for fetching more elements. Here, we want to have a button that on click will call fetch more. You can always simplify this kind of constructions where you have an error function and then you have an empty call later. And if you did not know about this, you can read Mostly Adequate Guide to Functional Programming. This book has a free version and I totally recommend it. All of a sudden, book recommendation. Yeah, but I totally recommend reading it. You will instantly see that, oh, this can be simplified. How? We'll just remove this. That's it. You will know that this is called... no, I don't want to say how is it called. I wanted to say that it's the identity function, but I'm not sure now. And also, we want to check if we can fetch more, this flag, and disable this button if we cannot. So we use the disabled attribute, prop, and then we disable it if it cannot fetch more. I'm using the exclamation mark to negate it, like not can fetch more, or we are fetching more. Actually, we are gonna add another thing, is fetching more. So you see how flexible React Query is. You have separate flags for is loading. It's the global state, like whatever is happening, like first query, like second query updating, whatever is loading will be true in this case. But only if you are fetching more, the is fetching more flag will be true. It's quite convenient. You can adapt for a lot of scenarios. Is fetching more. Actually, let me check the comments. No new comments so far. Yeah, if you feel lost or like want any more comments, just feel free to ask. I'm gonna check the comments once in a while. Now we have this button, and it probably should say load more. Let's format it. But it can say different things depending on the status. So for example, if it is fetching more, then it can show sort of a loading state. Like, let's make it a JavaScript block, and here we will say is fetching more, then loading more. Then otherwise, if we can fetch more, then we can say load more. So if we are fetching, that we show loading more. Otherwise, if we can fetch more, we show load more. Otherwise, we say nothing to load. And we can remove this. Let's go back to the code. No, let's go back to the browser and try to load more. Loading more, boom, error. What? Cannot read property of undefined. How did it end up like this? Data is undefined or what? Or group records is undefined? Yeah, data seems to be undefined. What? What? Again? Okay, let's say load more. app.js34. Group records. Okay, I'm a bit lost. The latest value of it was an array. Oh, we got an error second time. You see what happened? Invalid offset value. The value offset object is invalid. That's interesting. Invalid offset value. Let's see what we're actually sending in the API. Let's go to network. Let's go to the failed request, unprocessable entity, and let's see what we're sending object. Okay, and what this object is. API fetch to-dos. Console log. Console log. Key cursor. Console clear. Load more. What? Class dispatch config target. What? I did something very wrong. Okay, but let's try to figure out what is wrong here. I'm using the infinite query in the app.js with query name, query key, to-dos. I use the fetch to-dos function. How did I end up here? What? Let's see what's going on here. Clear this thing, reload the page. Okay, load more. That's interesting. Console log offset. Let's see what are we getting here. Offset is empty. Oh, last group. And we'll see what we're getting from the backend. Records array offset. Okay. return last group offset. Nice. Why am I getting this weird thing in the fetch to-dos? Undefined. And then I press this and I get class dispatch config target inst default. What is it passing there? Okay, I know. It's actually probably me being a smartass here. Remember this time when I told you that, oh, look, read this book, blah, blah, blah. You can simplify this stuff. That's a good lesson for all of us. You cannot do it here. Because if you call fetch more this way, you will pass the context to it, which is, this is an event. This is why it was looking so weird. This is a React synthetic event. So, to avoid having it here, we do it this way. Now it's gonna work. Sorry, everyone. I thought we can simplify it here. Not always, because it will be different. Here we're just omitting the argument and calling fetch more as it is. Let's reload the page, clean the console, load more, and now we got it. Isn't it fun? Yeah, sorry, I didn't check the messages. Thank you for help, everyone. But as you can see, that's because I was sending an event. Did you get what happened? I finally got it. So let's remove the console logs and continue. We have a console log here. We don't need it. I already know what kind of data are we getting. We don't need the console log here. We can actually simplify it, hopefully without repercussions, here. Yeah, and then we can go to api.js and remove this log. And I don't think we have any other logs, right? Yeah, it's clean. Now we can fetch to-dos. Let's add the checkbox to be able to check and check them. Let's go to the app and create a new component. New file, to-do item.js. Have you heard about React version 17? I hope so. Here is 16.13. Okay, they didn't update the... It's not yet in React, in Create React App. Otherwise, we could just omit this line. Import React from React is not needed in React 17. Export const to-do item equals something something let's say we return a fragment. It's actually a habit of mine. I really like to start creating components like, okay, let's add the fragment here. I don't know what will be the layout, so I'm going to use fragment. Anyway, what we want to have here is a list item. And this list item will contain the text of our to-do and the checkbox, and later a button to remove it. So we're going to add a span. And that will say text. How will we get the text? We will get it from the props. Text and completed. Why do I call them text and completed? Because I'm gonna... What happened too fast? Whatever. Because This is how my fields in Airtable are called. That's exactly the data that I'm going to get from the server. Let's go back. We're going to use text and complete it. Let's format the document. Now we're going to use then input, type, checkbox. The value checked will be the double exclamation mark. This way I'm gonna double exclamation mark completed. This way I'm gonna cast the value of completed, which might be undefined. And in this case, the component will think that we are not passing the value at all. And it will complain that we are either passing true or undefined to the checked property. And it will yell at us for converting the element to controlled, which is controlled by your parent component, and back to uncontrolled when we rely on HTML DOM to handle the element state. So to avoid this and to always send the Boolean value true, false for the checked, we use the double exclamation mark to achieve this. So if it will be undefined, we will cast it to Boolean to true, then we will cast it to false. Like double negation allows you to cast things to Booleans. And that's it for now. I just want to see that it shows the data. We will start working with mutations very, very soon, but for now, let's make sure that our component works. Let's go back to app.js. We need to change this list item, I'm going to remove it, to to-do item. So, and here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the ID as a key, and then, being very lazy, I'm going to do the following. As I know that fields contain everything that I need to show, like text and completed, I will just destructure them and spread all of them as props. That should be it. If I open the app now, I'm lost. Here it is. As you can see, it's still... Okay, it's already complaining that we need to pass the onChange handler. Let's do it. But otherwise, you saw that. We already rendered them, so it's fine. Let's go back to to-do item and pass the onChange. And here we are going to call the onCheck function that we define here. Let's clean the console, reload the app. We can load more. Everything's fine. And let's check the comments. I learned from you how to connect Firebase with React. I'm very glad to hear this, that you've learned something from my channel. That's very pleasing. I'm working on online CV. How can I call that function every 10 seconds? So if you need to call something in React component every 10 seconds, you need to use the useEffect hook. Let me show you and everyone. So let's say you have functional component. You want something to happen every 10 seconds. You do the following. React use effect. I'm not going to use any dependencies. So in this case, this is going to be called only when component is mounted, and then we can return a function that is going to be called when the component will get unmounted. Then we need to create a callback timer equals use timeout. Use interval. Oh no, what I'm saying, set interval. Set interval, then you have a callback here that will do something. And then you say how frequently should this fire. And then in return, you set remove, no, delete, clear interval, yeah. Clear interval, timer, something like this. And then here you can do something every 10,000 milliseconds. Yeah, correct me if anyone knows that there is some error in this code, but this is how I would initially approach this. Also, it would be cool to get it would be cool if you make video with custom hooks and deep explanation how better perform this dependency array and how to make it most performant. To be honest, I never had any issues with dependency array performance. We can talk about it on one of the next streams. Would be cool if you, like, for example, I would announce that, hey everyone, we're gonna talk about hooks next Wednesday, and then those who are interested in this, you can send the example repos that I could review during the stream, and we will try to solve the problems in them. But anyway, it was an off topic. That's for some other stream. So now it's time to perform the mutation. To change the data on backend, React query has the concept of mutations, just like GraphQL does. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to define this mutation. Const mutation returns an array of things so that you can easily name them whatever you like. So for example, mutate check. I can call it just mutate. It's just an array, so I can name it however I want to. Mutate check equals use mutation. I give the identifier to it to do check. It should be unique. To do check, and then I pass the options object. So in this options object, we can specify the onSuccess callback. What should happen when the mutation is successfully performed? In our case, we want to invalidate the cache of the to-dos query. So we want to say, hey, React query, the to-dos query that you cached, which it does automatically, is invalid. We've changed it. Please fetch it again. So we do it using the... I'm lost. Here you go. Using the query cache object. So here will be a callback that will be called onSuccess, and we need to get the query cache. A query cache is a global object that is available from any component. You get it using the use query cache. And then you can call query cache invalidate queries, and then you can pass what queries do you want to invalidate. In our case, it's to-dos, because our query that fetches the data is called to-dos. Now, let's make sure that when we call this mutation, we pass the right values. We're going to call mutate check, and then we're going to pass the object with ID. We're also going to get it from the props. And I think I'm already passing it, because no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Let's go back to app, scroll down, and pass key and ID like this. Back to to-do item. Mutate check ID, and then we need to send the fields. Fields. And the way Airtable works, if we scroll down on how to retrieve, create, update, you can send only the fields that you want to update. So for example, even if our items have text, completed, and notes, we can send, for example, only the completed field and the ID of the item that we want to update. And it will leave everything else the same and update only the completed. So let's do it. Completed equals here we can actually get the event reference, event, target, no, event, and here we do event, target, checked. I guess this is it. Okay. So now when we check this checkbox, we need to call the mutate check, the mutation that we got using use mutation, which should, I skipped passing the callback. So when you define the mutation, forget everything. It doesn't work like this. It works differently. When you call the use mutation, you need to pass the promise, like function that will return a promise that will actually perform this mutation. In our case, it will be called update to do, and it doesn't have the identifier because it's not a query. Queries have identifiers. Let's define this update to do function. Let's go to API. As you can see, everything regarding working with Airtable is in the api.js, and we export a new function, const update to do. This function needs to work with ID and fields. Inside of it, we're going to construct the URL, const URL template string. We can probably copy a big chunk of it here, but we will have to remove, like, we need API URL base table, and then we can remove everything else. We don't need it. We can actually send the ID here. Let's go to Airtable docs. You see API URL, database name, table name, and then the ID of the item that you want to update. So this is what we do here. Boom, 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 same fields. And then we can just fetch. Return fetch. In this case, we want to specify the method. The method should be patch. The difference between patch and put is that put should override the item, and patch keeps the item, just updates it, non-destructively. Headers. Here we need to pass the authentication header. And as I said, we can easily do it by destructing the auth header constant. It will add this authorization header to it. And then we also need to specify the content type, application, JSON. And then we need to pass the data. The data should be a JSON string. I think it's called body. It's not in the headers, sorry. Body equals JSON stringify an object with, look at this, at an example. It should be an object. Why cannot I select it? I can. It should be an object with a field called fields, which actually contains the fields that you want to change. So we already have the object called fields. We can pass it like this inside of the curly braces, so that it will be an object with a field, fields, and the value of this array. It's basically a synonym of saying fields. Like, it's the same as doing this. It's a shorthand, basically. Okay. Is anyone here? I just saw that there is 0 concurrent views. Probably it's a lag, it's a glitch. What about Redux Thunk and Redux with React query? That's an interesting topic on how to combine them and why would you want this, but I think it's a good idea to check the talk by the creator. I guess he's a creator of React Query, where he talks about different kinds of data and what belongs here, what belongs where. So there is the data that belongs to, that should be synchronized between the server and the client, and this is what React Query handles. And there is stuff that is client only. So the idea is that you separate those two kind of global states. Not all the global state is equal. Like before, we separated the local state, something that belongs to only one component, and something that belongs to the whole app. Now we make another distinction. There is state that needs to be synced with the backend, and this is what React Query handles. And there is state that is the client only, and this is what Redux will be handling. Let me actually send the link to the chat, because I think everyone should watch it. It's really good. It's really good presentation that explains how everything works. React Query YouTube. I think it's quite popular. Yeah, it's time to break up our global state. This one. It's from React Summit. Copy. Blip. And then I'm gonna send it to the chat. Here you go. Check out this video, it's great. It's gonna tell you a lot about React Query, the reasons it exists, what does it solve, and you will have a good idea on, for example, if you want to use it with Redux, what goes where. Where should you use Redux, where React Query, and so on. Okay, let's continue. We have the mutation here that should patch our to-do with the updated field with an updated field completed. But later, if we want to, we can update any field of the to-do using this item. We just need to send out a set of fields from the arguments. Let's go back to the to-do item. I think, to be honest, it should work at this point already, because on check, when we change the checkbox input value, we call the mutate check, the mutation that we got from update to do. That's why it won't work. Update to do, because we needed to import it. By the way, maybe someone knows what should, like, I'm quite lazy. I'm not fixing this problem, but this is very annoying. You see this update to do, it's not imported. I press command dot, it says no code actions available. Wait a sec. And then I remove it, start typing, and with auto suggestion, it works. What is wrong with my VS Code? If anyone had this kind of problem before, please let me know how to fix it. I'm just procrastinating the research and fixing it because it's like, well, I don't want to do it. Let's go back to the browser. Clear the console, load more. This still works. Check test, it's checked. Let's go to the table. It's completed. Let's go back. Hey everyone, React Query rocks. Check it. Checked. Go back. It's also checked. Cool. We now have a working mutation. Press cursor at the end of the word and then try to autocomplete. Yeah, and the link to the book. Yeah, I actually still have the tab open. Copy, and we add it to the chat. Here you go. Let's try to do this suggestion. Remove. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's remove the import and then try to put the cursor at the end of the word and then try to autocomplete. Well, when I autocomplete, I usually just press tab to do. Yeah, with autocomplete, it works. Press the cursor, then the word, press Control space. Okay. I'm at the end, let's remove this. I'm at the end of the word. I'm pressing Control space. Okay, no, this is this switches the layout. Okay, I guess Command space. No, this opens the spotlight. Control space. No, Control space will change the keyboard layout. No, that's not it. Usually it's Command dot. If I press Command space, well, okay, we enter Spotlight search. If I press Control space, then surprise, like what? You will see Russian characters. That's what will happen. So, okay, I guess that's for some other time. Okay, Command space, open Spotlight search. So how I do it now is like I'm using auto completion to auto import. That's wrong. That's kind of stupid. But something is wrong with my VS Code setup. I will figure it out later. By the way, I was playing lately with Doom, the Doom Emacs configuration framework. Have anyone tried it also? I think it's quite neat. It looks like this. Doom run, and then it opened it on another screen. Okay, here you go. So it looks like this. We can use the space to open. We can use space. For example, if we want to open the project and it uses projectile, you can space pp, and it will choose the project. For example, the most recent one was Full Stack React TypeScript, the book that I wrote. And then we can, for example, open the app file, and it will be super slow. And then we basically can edit it here. It also supports Vim in kind of a bit weird way. Some movement works differently somehow, like it has some changes, like it uses the evil mode for Emacs. But it's fun to learn about. The coolest thing that it has is G, how is it called? Space G? Yeah, Magit. It's quite cool. It allows you to be very proficient, very efficient with Git. But anyway, it's another off topic. Quite, yes. Let's get back to the code. We have working mutations, right? What else do we want to have here? We can update them, we can load more. I want to be able to add and remove items. Let's do the removing part first. To do this, we'll just create another mutation. Mutate, delete, equals use mutation, everything the same. Here we'll use another function called delete to do. We'll need to define it, of course. And then it does exactly the same. On success, we pass the configuration object with onSuccess callback that needs to invalidate the to-dos queries. That's it. Let's add a button. With text delete. And on click, it needs to call the remove function. And this remove function will call mutate, delete, and it needs to pass the ID to it. That's it. Now we go to api.js again. We define another function, export const delete to do equals a function that receives only the ID. That's the only thing we need to know about the item. And then it creates the URL, basically same way as here. API URL, base table, and the ID of the item you want to remove. And then it calls the fetch method, return fetch, a URL, but the method should be delete, and headers, of course, you need to be authenticated. So we do it like this, auth header. That should do it. Let's go to to-do item, import the delete to-do. Then go back to the app and try to delete the thing. I want to delete the foo item. Boom. It deleted it. Now the last one. Delete it. Cool. And the last thing that I want to do today with the React query, and then we'll talk a little bit about the tests and maybe have a little Q&A if you still have resource, if you still have energy. I'm actually full of energy. I did the full cup of coffee. It's almost the size of my head. Let's add the to-do items now. To do this, we're going to create another component, new file, add the to-do.js, import React, IMR tab, yeah, export, const, add to-do equals a component. Do we have more comments? Control backspace. Okay, let's try it out. I'm gonna go back to to-do item. I'm gonna remove the delete to-do and press Control backspace. It just removed the character. Let's try another like this. No. Okay, maybe on Mac it's command backspace. Okay, let's forget about it. I have a theory. What if it would work if I wouldn't have the Vim plugin? Just a theory, but I think that's because of it. Anyway, yeah, it's a bit upsetting that I have to do this, like, let's remove a character, let's import it. But anyway, yeah, I will try to figure this out. It's very likely. It's very likely that a lot of my hotkeys are not working correctly because of this Vim plugin. It's probably a bad advertisement for Vim in VS Code, but this is how it is. Anyway, let's create the component to add new to-do items. The layout will be the following. It's going to be a fragment, because I like fragments. Then it will have a horizontal line in the bottom, and then it will have an input. Here will be another example of my laziness. Instead of doing it like with maybe a form or something, I'm just going to create a reference that will hold the link, the reference of the actual HTML element. I will call it input ref equals use ref. That's it. And pass it here. Input ref. And then we need a button that will say add to do. Maybe capitalized like this. Add to do, and then it will have an on-click handler where we'll call an add to do function that we'll define here. Add to do. What I'm doing? I'm lost in the brackets. And in this function, we're gonna call a mutation later. But first, we'll need to define this mutation. Const mutate let's call it add, mutate add equals use mutation. Okay, my spider sense tells me that there are new comments. Hi Max, hi Ivan. I just sensed that there is a new comment. We'll call create to do with an options object where we pass on success, where, guess what? We're gonna still invalidate the to-dos query because we are gonna add the to-do item and we wanted to refetch the data. On success, we need the query cache, const query cache equals use query, what? Use query cache. And here we call query cache invalidate queries to-dos. That's it. And now on add to do, we call mutate add, and we need to pass the value to it. This function that is going to be called here, create to do, is going to receive the fields with which we want to create the new item. For now, I'm going to keep it simple. Later, as I said, I have a plan how to make this application awesome. I probably will make it look good, not like this. This is cringy bad. Anyway, it's a prototype. So I'm going to pass only the text, because later I'm going to add the notes and styling, but for now, we're going to keep it simple. Input ref current. This is where the link to the currently stored reference is being stored, and we take the value from it. So whatever the value of the input is, we just send it as a text to our mutation, which is create to do function. Then we call input ref current value equals an empty string. So we reset the value of the input to an empty string every time we click this button. I think this is it. The component is ready. We just need to create the create to do function. Let's go to api.js, define another function, const. What are we doing? We're creating the items, right? Create to do. It's a function. It receives an object with fields. Actually, it can receive just fields, and it will be expected to be an object because this is how we send the values. If we go to add to do, you will see that we are sending the fields object. So we don't need to destructure it. We just receive it as one piece. We construct the URL. We probably can reuse, I think we can reuse this one. But we don't know the ID. It's not created yet. ID is generated automatically on the backend, so we just omit it. We don't need it at all. And we're going to use the post method. Return, fetch, URL, the options object, method, post, headers. Of course, we destructure the auth header, and then we need to add a content type. Content type, application JSON. Now we can send the body, and the body will basically be fields, right? So we need to JSON stringify it. And I think that should be it. If we go to add to do, we import the create to do method. We open the app, and what did I expect if I'm not using this component? Go back to app.js, and before the unordered list, let's add the add to do, and use mutation is not defined. Cool. Why? Let's remove this. Use mutation. Okay. Clear the console. Let's actually close it. Let's try creating new let's try removing this thingy. Okay, and let's try to create a new one. New one, add to do. Boom, it works. This is it for the React query topic. Let's see the comments if we have anything new. Hey Igor, nice to see you. Hey Tony, I have just joined the stream and I can't understand what is the pros and cons using React query in comparison with other ways. Yeah, let me be brief. First of all, I've shared a link in this chat with a talk from the creator of React query. I'm gonna Sorry, I've closed the stream tab. Wait a second, please, folks. I'm gonna open it back and see the comments again. So, here is the video that I recommended to watch about React query. It's a video from the creator of... Okay, I'm being stupid probably. But trust me, there is... Okay, let's do it again. Google React query YouTube. And then this video. So this dude explains what is React query and what are the benefits of using it. In short, there are two kinds of state in modern React applications. One kind of the state is that the state of the app itself. Like for example, if you have some sort of drop down opened or something like this. And another kind of state is something that needs to be in sync with the backend. And he talks about creating this React query to solve this separation problem, like where we can have some tool to keep the data that needs to be in sync with the backend in sync, and everything else can be handled by MobX, Redux, or whatever. If you compare the React query with other methods, which would be what? If you use REST API, then most likely you will just have to write it by hand. And in this case, instead of this, where you just tell use infinite query or just use query, you would have to write use effect plus some state, and then you have to keep track of like if you're fetching, if you got an error, like everything like this. And when you're using React query, you would just call it. You specify the unique key for this query. You specify the function that returns an async function, basically a function that returns a promise with the data, and maybe some other options, but it's like some next level, a bit more complex thing. And that's it. And then you get a bunch of flags like is loading, is fetching more, is error, object describing the data that you got, the errors if you got them, and some functions to do additional stuff on top of it. So basically you, instead of writing like 50 lines or even more of data fetching code, you abstract it to React query. Good thing is that the fetching mechanism, it's fetching mechanism agnostic. You can even use the React query with GraphQL. Here's an example where you use it with GraphQL request. And I think this is awesome. I hope this answers this question. Hey Max, greeting from SPB. Hello. Yeah, I'm from St. Petersburg, actually originally. Now I live in Stockholm, but my hometown is St. Petersburg. What type of projects to choose for portfolio for junior developer position if you don't have commercial experience? Best thing to do, you can create some projects for non-profit organizations. So just Google some non-profits which you could help as a volunteer. This is good. I believe you can join some open source projects. these are like two of the best options. And if you cannot join the non-profit to develop an app for them, or you cannot join the open source project, you can do a project for yourself, but then I would do something complex enough. That's what I usually recommend. For example, you can make a React client for Spotify. Or you can make a React client for GitHub, or React client for whatever has an API. So I would recommend doing this. This way you will learn more about working with APIs. If you will do something for GitHub, for example, you will also learn about GraphQL, how to work with GraphQL, and it's great. It will be useful. GraphQL is quite popular these days. Yeah, I think this is it. Non-profits, open source, or some big enough project like client for Spotify. If anyone has better suggestions, please let us know in the comments. I think that is useful for a lot of people, this kind of advice. But anyway, we're done with React query. Let me do the following. I'm gonna rq to do. I'm gonna hub create. I'm gonna create a repo. I'm gonna share it with you. If you want to play with it and improve it, you can totally do it. It's gonna be here, Satan's Deer rq to do. I'm gonna send it in the comments. Here you go. And then Julio Miricio, what are you trying to do with the Vim stuff? What do you mean? I didn't get the question. Like, it's just, I used to use Vim a lot back then, a few years ago. Now I kind of switched to VS Code, but Vim movements are still more like comfortable for me than keyboard movements, so this is why I stick to it. Git add, git commit, implement. Whoa, wait a second. Vim git ignore. I want to ignore .env. And I'm gonna cp dot. You know what? This is what I'm. No, it won't work this way. Git status. Okay, cool. Now .env is not included. Now I'm gonna commit. Add. Remove. Check. Uncheck. To-dos. Git push you origin master. How is your Emacs exploration going? Great advice about working for non-profits, by the way, learning and bringing value at the same time. Yeah, that's the point. The Emacs exploration is not going anywhere. I switched back to VS Code. So yeah, I've shared the repo with you. Now we can switch to other stuff. I was going to talk a little bit about tests. So I think a lot of people struggle with writing tests because it's... Are you going to make short version video from... I'm probably going to record the video from scratch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this repo a bit more, add more features to it, like editing the markdown. So for example, if you open the database, it has notes field. And this notes field is a big text, like what is the type? Customize field type, it's long text. So my idea is that it will contain the markdown, and I found two libraries. One of them is React Markdown that will allow me to render the markdown in the application, and another one is React Simple Code Editor. This way I will allow the user to edit the markdown. So I'm gonna add those features, I think, and then record the video from scratch explaining how does React query work and how to do this simple to-do application. That's the plan. But maybe I will just edit this video and no, I won't, because it's gonna be 2 hours in total, and it's quite hard to edit this kind of longer videos. I think I will just record it from scratch. It's gonna be easier. Anyway, we're moving to the next topic, and the next topic is tests. I want to discuss the, like, conceptually on a very high level, how to test React components and what does it even imply. So let's think about it in words. I have a repo that I've prepared to demonstrate how to do it. But first, let's go to README, remove everything here, and think about React components. What do they do, and what do they have that we can test at all? So first thing that is obvious, React components have the layout, so they render. Also, React components perform some actions. So for example, when they mount, they can perform a side effect and fetch some data. That's an action. That's what I mean. What else can they do? Render, perform actions. I think this is it. If you talk about rendering, they can render differently, and this might depend on props, and also depending on the internal state. Feel free to write the comments if you think that I'm missing something out in this conceptualizing of React components. So here I'm talking about React components rendering differently, either depending on props, on state, or maybe on the context. Because you might not send the data through the context, you might send it through the props, you might send it through the context instead. But it's almost the same, depending on context. So with different state, context, or props, our component can render differently. Then perform actions on mount. They can perform actions on user event. And then they can perform actions, and by actions I actually mean side effects. To be honest, I think this is it. Am I missing something? Components can render, and they can render differently depending on props, context, and state. And they can perform actions on mount and on user events. So for example, when the user enters the text, or when the user clicks the button or something. And then what can go differently? Like when we have I want to write that there can be conditions. It can perform actions on mount and on user event. And in both cases, with conditions. It doesn't make much sense structurally, but I still want to put it here. That the action can be performed or it can be skipped depending on the state or props or whatever, like outside terms of this action. Now let's see how can we use this conceptual understanding of what can we... Oh, you're great. Okay, thank you. Let's see how can we use this conceptual understanding of everything that we can test. I think this is exhaustive. If you have any objections, just let me know, but I think this is it. You cannot test anything else. You can test how the component renders, and it can be different depending on prop, state, and context, and the fact that it calls some actions. So here's the example. Let's say we have a search box. The idea is that this component knows nothing about how the search is performed. It's very isolated. You pass the request search function to it as a prop, and then internally it only handles the user input. It has an input field that is text that updates the query, which is stored in the state of this component, and then you click the button. This is it. If you look at this component, you will see that there are two things that it's doing. First of all, it's rendering the layout, the thing that we've discussed here. It's rendering. That's what we need to test. Does it render differently depending on props, context, or state? Let's look at this. First thing that I would look at would be some sort of early return. So for example, if, or any sort of condition. Like if you have a condition in the layout, that means that with different props, state, or whatever, your component might render differently. In our case, we don't have any conditions. There could be like if query, and then return, I don't know, span that says has query instead of the actual layout. I'm just theoretizing, but it doesn't have any conditions. That means that we need only one test case to check that it renders correctly. The easiest way to check this would be to make a snapshot test and forget about it. But it wouldn't be too meaningful because, well, who reads snapshot tests, right? People usually just say just test -u and snapshot tests get updated. So for this component to work, we need two elements. First, we need an input, and next we need a search button that will actually trigger the search. Let's see how is it reflected in the tests. We have the test case. It's just top level. Now I am tending more to do it like this, describe, to have a top level encompassing, enclosing describe that says the name of the component that we're testing, in this case search box, and then inside of it format the document, and then inside of it we have all the cases. So first we need to test that it renders correctly. If it would have a condition, then I would have another describe block to be able to focus on just rendering aspect, because there is actions and rendering, two big aspects of every component. Rendering and actions, that's it. Now, inside of the test, if I would have a condition inside of the rendering block, I would say describe rendering No, I wouldn't do it. Sorry. I would actually start with the conditions that make it render differently. So for example, depending on props, let's say that it can have some flag. Describe with some flag, and then I would have a callback, and inside of it I would have an it block renders without an input, for instance. Or if there is another condition, without some flag, it renders with an input or with a button, or whatever happens with my component with this sort of condition. Now, as we don't have any of those conditions in the component, it just renders, we can make sure that it renders correctly by verifying that it has an input and it has a button. And this is reflected in the test. It renders correctly, we render the item, we get the methods to find the elements in the rendered thing from React testing library, and then we expect that if we query for test ID search button, we will find it. And if we query for placeholder text search, we will find it. So I'm looking for the placeholder search and for data test ID search button. If I find both elements, then I assume that the component was rendered correctly. Next, our component performs actions, and they are related to different parts of this component. For example, this simple component has two elements, and one of them works kind of independently. For example, input, it already has its own independent behavior. When you type in the value, it needs to update. If we would keep the input uncontrolled, we wouldn't have to test it, because then it's the functionality that comes by default from the browser. But as we have value and onChange, as it is a controlled input, and you can screw up with them, you can break it and make it not working, you need to test it. So if we go back to the tests, input value, updates onChange. Is there anything else that we need to test on input? That's the only thing that the input on its own does. Keep in mind that it would be very tempting to test that input updates the state, but it's not something that the user is aware about. For the user, what user sees when he or she opens the page is that you enter the text and it's reflected in the input. That's it. User knows nothing about the state, and the test should treat the component as a black box. It should not matter if it has an internal state. So for example, if I remove the value and onChange, the input will continue to function like this. And my tests won't break because they test the functionality. You see what I mean? Like, we need to test the functionality from the outside. The tests should not know anything about the internals of your component. So in this case, instead of testing that the state have changed, no, we don't care. There might be no state at all. Who cares? What we care about is from the user's perspective, that when we input some text, what we do here, we render the search box, we get the function to find it by the placeholder, we find an element with a placeholder search, we store it into the constant search input, and then we call the trigger the change event on it by setting the value test on it. And then what we want to know is that actual value of the component have changed, that now it shows the text that we've entered. That's it. We don't care here about the state at all. Hello, thanks for nice content. Should I write tests if I use TypeScript? I think using TypeScript should assume that you can skip testing, or am I wrong? Yes, you're kind of wrong. TypeScript helps you to make sure that your components, not components, but parts of your code, communicate correctly. TypeScript enforces the contract between them. But you see, like, each of the parts of your code is still a piece of functionality. So a component is complex enough to have bugs in itself, right? The function is complex enough to have bugs in itself. The only thing TypeScript does, it makes sure that if the function works only with strings or only with numbers, that's the only numbers or string that you will be able to pass to it. So I would say that if you imagine your application as a set of circles, like each circle representing an element, like a function or component or a module or whatever, then TypeScript is something that ensures that there are no bugs in between them, but not inside of each of them. So you still need to test each and individual component. In my book, now I'm gonna just self-promote and plug the book advertisement here, but it makes sense. Full stack React TypeScript. In my book, the second chapter is actually fully dedicated to showing how to test your React applications using React testing library in TypeScript. So it assumes that you have a store application. You can see a part of it, like it's a Goblin store where you can buy some fantasy weapons. It assumes that you have a TypeScript-based store application. And yes, you need to write tests. Tests ensure the behavior of the parts of your application. TypeScript ensures the syntactic correctness. So for example, if you say in JavaScript is very permissive. It allows you to say syntactically wrong things that are syntactically wrong, that don't make sense. So for example, you can say, let's just write a little bit. In JavaScript, you can say const rocket equals undefined. I can do this, and then I can do the following: rocket engine throttle. You can read it and without evaluating say that this is not going to end well. There is no field engine on undefined, there is no throttle on a non-existent engine, and so on. In TypeScript, you just couldn't do it. Let me show you what would happen in TypeScript. cd workspace npx create react app template TypeScript. How will we call it? TS React example. I hope I didn't create this. Yeah, okay, let's wait a second. If I use no daemon, I can see reason of TypeScript as each save will show any syntax errors immediately. Okay, syntax errors can be different. JavaScript is aware of some syntax errors, but completely unaware about type-related, the type of the variable-related issues. It's just impossible. It will tell you about some issues, but not about the others. Some syntactic problems can be fixed with ESLint, but not all of them. And only TypeScript or Flow or the type checking mechanism can help with what I'm talking about. cdts react example code. And now let's go to, I don't know, let's go to index.tsx and let's try to do the following. Const rocket equals undefined. Rocket engine object is possibly undefined. Boom. You already have an error. You can actually force TypeScript to shut up and do the thing. Am I doing it wrong? Probably. Property engine does not exist on type never. Yeah, it doesn't allow you to do this. And you don't even need to relaunch your code. It does it syntactically. Do you have some interesting thoughts of how to write clean best practice code? Maybe some interesting notes. What I'm usually... So about best practices, I usually recommend to adapt more kind of a hacker mindset where you just stop looking for them and instead focus on getting experience, like breaking things and seeing what works and what not, what causes problems and what doesn't. Instead of trying to find some good advice in the internet, even though it feels good, it feels like you are learning something. Imagine that I tell you some advice, like do this, don't do that. And then you talk with your colleagues, like, look guys, or look folks, we should not do this because this dude in the internet says that we shouldn't. Does it make sense? It is not a very good way of learning stuff. It's really limiting. Instead, I would recommend focusing on like, okay, here's the task. We need to do this thing, like develop some application like online store, or like we need to create an authentication system for the online store. And then what is the best way to do it? Should we use cookie-based authentication? Should we use token-based authentication? Should we use basic auth? Probably not, but still, should we? I don't know. And how you should do it is by listing what kind of limitations do you have and what are the requirements. What should you be able to do with this system and what is limiting you in your choices. And then trying to analyze what kind of options can you find, listing the pros and cons of each of them and deciding for yourself. It's way better. Like the code itself, you see what I'm talking about? I'm talking about functionality. You're implementing the sign up, for example. You're not implementing a clean code. You're implementing the sign up, something that does something for the user. And then you go through the requirements and the limitations and whatnot, and you solve the problem. Clean code is just a way to make the support of this code, supporting this code cheaper and easier. That's the only thing. And then usually it all boils down to put things that change together close to each other and separate the things that should not change together. That's that's what it boils down to. That's it. All the other things, I don't know. I don't have any advice, to be honest, other than that. Like, try to just find out things on your own. That's the best I can say. Otherwise, there are well-known principles like solid. It's very popular. People use it. There are a lot of arguments for those principles in the solid acronym. So look up those. They're still valid for React if you want. But I hope what I said will be useful for you. Hi, thanks for the stream. Are you going to do kind of a loading state on props change for test it later? Loading state on props in this test. Okay, I'm lost. Probably here. No, in this test, I'm not gonna do it. This is just some example code from the course, I think, that I was teaching or something. It's just to talk about the tests a little bit and about the conceptual understanding of what component can do, what is part of its behavior, and how can you think about it to test it easier. My idea is that when you know what kind of things can you potentially test, like you can test what components, what is the component's output, and what are the component's side effects that it can perform, like call the functions. And then the idea of, depending on the starting conditions, like the input, like with this prop or with that prop, with this state or with that state, you have different describe blocks. So you group conditions under which this component will behave differently. So for example, if there would be a flag under which the component would render differently, then as I said, I would have, where is it? I would have multiple describe blocks, one for each of the input conditions. Now let's go to the input value. We've discussed that the input value should be rendered in the test, and we shouldn't check that the state of the component changed. Even though it did change, we shouldn't care about it because it's an implementation detail and it's something that should not be tested. What we want to test is the behavior that the user can observe. So your test should basically automate using your component as a user, something like this. So something that you could do yourself from the browser or from some other environment to check that it works. Next, we have the search button, and here is a good illustration of how the action can behave differently depending on circumstances. So we have search button, and if we open the test, we have an if block. And this is already a sign that I would probably have a divergence of two different describe blocks somewhere in the test, because it can call the request search, or it can do nothing. So there are two different behaviors when you click this button. And this means that inside of my test, with empty query and with data inside query, I will have two different behaviors. Then you will notice that this query thing, it doesn't come from the props, it comes from the state. It might be very tempting to try to just, how can we force different state on component? I think that it's not a good idea, and it's very hard to do, and it should not be done at all. And it's better to just do the following. When you look at the tests, they usually break down in three phases. First one is the arrangement phase. Like here, we create the mock request search function that we get from the jest, and we can check if it was called or anything. Then we render the item, and this whole thing is an arrange step. We prepare to run the test. Then goes the act. We fire an event, and then we assert. Whoa. In this case, we check that request search was not called, because with empty query does not trigger request search function. That's the behavior we want to see. When we arrange it, and here is where what I want to say is that you should not mock the state. You shouldn't change the state manually. What you should do is Oh, that's a bad example. Let's go to the next case. What you should do if you want to change the state, find the input, like change it like the user would do it. Perform the actions that would lead to this state of the component. So for example, if the query comes from the input, then what we do, we find the search input, we call the change event on it, it changes the value. So this is the arrange step, this whole thing. Arrange. Then we perform the act, and then we perform the assert. So what happens here? We get the search input element, we insert the text in it, type in something, we click the button, and then we expect the request search button to be called. Okay, I see some Alexei speaking Russian with us, and he wants me to say hi to Tolsterobry. Oh, I see. A best practices is a myth. Just do stuff over and over and you will have your own best practices by mistakes. I can sign by this. There is a distinction between knowledge and skills. By learning by doing, when you try and see for yourself, do you like the results? Is it good? Or did you suffer from the consequences of your decisions? You will develop skills and you will develop your own judgment, and also the meta skill of learning will also progress and you will become more powerful in a way. And knowledge is very cheap. Like you read an article and boom, you have some knowledge. First of all, you can forget, and second of all, this knowledge might not be properly rooted. Let's say you read an article and then the dude there or some girl there, like the author, says, do this, don't do that. Zero explanations. Any sort of argument, any sort of decision making, like, we should not do this. Why? The article says so. It's not a good enough reason. And if you go by your experience, you experiment, you do some projects, you fail, you do mistakes, and you know exactly what will happen. Like you have an experience, maybe painful experience, maybe you've lost some money, maybe you did such a mistake that you've lost a job. This also can happen, but you know exactly what will happen if you repeat it. And then you can explain to your team, like, look folks, this is what's gonna happen if you do this kind of stuff. Like if you drop the production database, we'll probably all be fired or something like this. So any questions about the tests and the idea of organizing them? I'm trying, like, the reason I wanted to talk about it and try to explain my stance on this is because I'm going to write another book soon about tests, and I would like to know what kind of questions do people have about tests and how can I simplify it for people to have some sort of mental framework where instead of feeling lost and randomly trying like, okay, like I can test this or that, you have a mental framework and you know step by step what kind of things you can test and how to do each kind of those tests, like with specific recipes. For example, if you want to test the behavior, then you do it this way. If you want to test a side effect, then blah, 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 and so on and so forth. If you don't have any questions about the tests, then we have a Q&A, and that's basically it. Let's chat a bit. And maybe you have any suggestions about the next topics for the next stream. What is the most employable part about tests? Can you please rephrase the question? I don't quite get. What do you mean by employable part about tests? Firebase with React. Not sure if you have done anything similar. Yeah, I actually have a bunch of videos about Firebase and React. If you go to my channel, YouTube, your channel, videos, and you scroll down long enough, It's quite an old video. I did it a couple years ago, maybe 1 year ago. Where is it? One of those yellow things. Firebase auth. Yeah, exactly. 1 year ago. It's actually one of the most popular video of mine. 62 kilobytes of views. That's one thing. That's how to authenticate using React and Firebase. Another thing is how to use Firestore. Another video is about using Firebase CRUD, like how to create, read, update a bunch of items. And then also Firebase and Express.js has nothing to do with React. Upload files with Firebase and React. How to host multiple sites, like if you want to have a separate admin and such. Yeah, I have quite a few videos about Firebase and React. What in tests is most likely to get you a job, and what jobs specifically need them the most? I wouldn't say that there is some particular thing, but regarding tests, what will make you stand out from other developers is attention to detail. You first need to learn how to rigorously test your components manually, I would say. Your first thing to do is to learn how to ensure quality manually. Like if you did something, how to know that it works. That's the first step. Then automation. And here, I don't know, I think it's a sort of like unified, so like in non-divisible skill. Like you either can write tests or cannot. I don't think there is some aspect that will get you a job, but I think the quality of you, that you can ensure quality of your code, will get you a job, will make you more employable. So I would start with trying to be more attentive, trying to be more rigorous. And what can help with this, some specific advice here, developing checklists. Like if you work on some application and you notice that when you test some functionality, you follow some sort of routine that may be developed unconsciously. So what can you do is you can open a document and write down what are the steps that you usually follow. Like how do you ensure that you tested it rigorously? How do you make sure that you've tested all the aspects of your application? So I would try to write down the steps and then look at them and see, actually, I'm already quite good at this. Actually, this is a mess. I can do better. That's the first thing I would do. Second, I would do, after I already know how to be attentive, I know how to find out what is the functionality of the app, how to test it manually, I would go to test automation and develop the skills there. But it doesn't mean that you can develop some aspects. It just means that you do it more and get sort of habits doing it. I guess that's what I can say about it. Would you know how to convert a React Firebase website into server-side rendered with Sass, custom fonts, and modern Webpack Babel syntax, as the Firebase and Fireship suites are deprecated? So with SSR, it would be kind of like this one, where I don't use React, but I use Express.js. I want to record the video about server-side rendering because I have a task at work that is sort of related. So maybe next week I want to talk about server-side rendering in React and maybe make an isomorphic application. What's interesting for me there is how do you preserve the authentication? So for example, when the user is authenticated, how do you serve the content from SSR with React that should be visible only to authenticated users? Maybe we'll do it using Firebase. I cannot guarantee anything. I just want to tinker with it, play around and test different approaches. But if you have ideas, how can I implement it? Probably there is a common way to implement authentication with SSR. I just never implemented it in production. So let's see. If you have any advice, if you have the links, just reach out to me in Discord. Feel free to talk to me. That will be appreciated. Next isn't good for this as you cannot use the Firebase caching system. To be honest, if we are going to talk about server-side rendering and what I would use, what's going on? I would probably use Razzle. This one. So this is a boilerplate generator that creates simple, minimalistic apps. You can go to examples, and then we open with Webpack config, src, and there you see is a client and a server. And basically what it does, if you open the server, it is a simple Express application that handles all the requests. This asterisk means that all requests go through this middleware. It generates the markup, which will be just a string, by calling the render-to-string method with the application. Okay, that's not very good because it's not going to support routing. There should be a better example. Maybe this one. Server. Yeah, exactly. And then it would render it to string with the static router and pass the request URL to the static router as a location, and then render your application will work properly, like it has a router, but instead of the browser router, it uses the static router. And then it would render a layout with markup inside of the div-id root. That's what I would use. It's very minimalistic. As you can see, it's only the server, the client, and then whatever you write as your application. Next.js does a lot of decisions for you, and I don't really like it. I want to have something more minimalistic. Any tips on how to not get overwhelmed when you need to learn new tool stack for work tasks? I usually keep a work log. This helps with overwhelming not only when you learn new stuff, but also when you just try to solve some problem. I often notice that when I'm tired, I start walking in circles. Like I need to solve this task and I'm just tiring myself and repeating same actions over and over sometimes. So what helps with this is that I keep a work log document, something like in the root of the project that I'm working, I create a worklog.md, and then I just write items here, like maybe just as a list, did this. And then maybe I have an assumption. I would make a break and I think, I should try doing that. And then, failed. Then I think like, okay, maybe some other, I can do something else. You can do the same, but instead of using it for solving some specific problems, you can do it for education. Like you learn something, you write it down, you learn something, you write it down, and so on. So hope it helps. I saw the Razzle one, but I didn't think I could use it that for converting the apps I have already made. Yeah, I don't think you will have to do some manual work there. Are there any proven ways minimize the build React bundle? Many app is quite small, but it already takes 2 megabytes. Yeah, actually I'm currently solving similar kind of problem. You can use Webpack bundle analyzer. So what it does, it creates this diagram that you can see how to optimize. And recently in my Webpack setup, what I've noticed is that it had a lot of like 7 or 8 packages that were like bn.js. I was like, what? What is this bn.js? Turned out that this is the big number library that allows you to work with big numbers in JavaScript. And I was like, what? Where are they coming from? And this is where you use, for example, if you're using yarn, then you can say yarn y and bn.js, or the name of the library that is taking too much space. Or if you're using npm, then you use npm ls, yeah, I think it's npm ls bn.js or whatever name of the library that you want to find out. And then, where are we? Let's see. For example, there is this find up somewhere. Yarn y find up. Why do we have the module find up? And then it shows you like found this because of that, and you see which packages pulled this dependency to you. So when I started investigation about the bn.js, I realized that all of those bn libraries come from Webpack itself. I was like, what? And turned out that if your application somewhere uses Node.js APIs, like you know that browser JavaScript and Node.js JavaScript, they differ. They have different APIs. If you use Node.js APIs anywhere, Webpack will automatically add the polyfill for them, and it's gonna be huge. It's like 1 megabyte or something. So when I cleaned this up, the bundle reduced by 1 megabyte. So that's something to try. Hi, I'm going to create engineering thesis this year. I'm creating video chat app. What do you think about MERN stack as a technology stack for this project? I think why not? I'm curious what kind of technology are you going to use for streaming, because several years ago I used to use RTMP streams. But if it's something like Zoom, then you probably np Node.js. Yeah, I think you can do it using RTMP, but there are other protocols as well. So I don't know. I can't recommend anything because it didn't work with this technology anywhere close to these days, like it was several years ago. Can you advise on JS React testing library, Enzyme, Cypress, which is best, and what is their role for enterprise React app to test? So you've named a bunch of products. React testing library is a library is competing with Enzyme directly. They're closing the same niche, and between them, I definitely would choose React testing library because it has nicer API and it forces you to use better practices, being short. Otherwise, just compare the APIs of them. React testing library is very systematic. It's very well structured. It has only a few components to the names. Like if you open React testing library documentation, and then you will open queries, you will see get by, get all by, query all by, and then by what you can query. By label text, by placeholder text, by text, alt text, title, and by role. You combine the prefix, the suffix, boom, you get the name. If we are talking about Enzyme, they have a ton of different functions. I just fail to remember them. Like what? All of this, how am I supposed to learn it? No. Please don't, no. So yeah, I prefer React testing library. I don't like Enzyme. Regarding Cypress, I don't like Cypress. In the beginning of the stream, I told that I had problems with it on Windows machine. And also, when I tried it last time, it didn't support anything but Chrome. Nowadays, it seems to support Chrome and Firefox. And another thing is that if you want to have multi-window, multi-tab flows, then you won't be able to do it there. It's quite limiting. And I would prefer, for end-to-end testing, I would probably use Test Cafe. Is it possible to use GraphQL subscription sockets live data with React query? That's a good question, and I don't know. I know that you can use Let's actually go to... So thing is, GraphQL is not some alien technology. You're still performing HTTP requests, right? But instead of making requests like in REST API, you do them on different routes. You have one route for the API, and then you send objects describing the form of the data that you want to get. That's it. That's GraphQL in a nutshell. And then everything else, like subscriptions, is something that the library is doing for you. Let's search subscriptions. Query cache subscribe method can be used to script the query cache. No, that's not it. It will require some additional research. I cannot tell. Updates from mutation responses. Caching default. So yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. WebRTC. Yeah, that makes sense to use WebRTC if you're using the streaming app. I think it's legit. Why not? Is it worth using Lighthouse or another program to check how efficient your app is? I would say yes, it is important. And Lighthouse gives you a comprehensive review of like how big is your bundle, how much time does it require before the initial render. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to use this kind of benchmark to automate it. So we are way beyond 2 hours. Do you think that we want to talk about anything else, or we can stop this, call it a day? It's 9:30 for me. You know what, I would wait for some last question, like maybe one, and then we call it a day. Thank you. Okay, so far I see that there are no other questions. So probably, yeah. Let's say that this is the day. Would you recommend Preact? I think Preact is a good idea if you want to save on the bundle size. Otherwise, it tries to keep up with the React API. I haven't tried it myself, so I'm just saying what I've heard. So don't listen to me and try for yourself if you like it. Okay, thanks everyone for coming to today's stream. We're gonna meet next Wednesday, I believe, again. If not, I will announce it in the Discord channel. All the news about new streams are in the Discord. By the way, let me send the link to my Discord chat if there are some new people who are not who don't know about the Discord server yet. Wait a sec. My links, Discord. Here you go. And here's the link. Boom. So yeah, if you want to join my Discord and then we can chat there, you can suggest new topics for the videos or for the streams, please go ahead. You will be welcome there. See you next time. Have a great evening or day or night, whatever you have. It was nice to talk to you folks. Bye.